What's amazing is that there have been many times where I have found more healing by being or giving a listening ear than by receiving a listening ear. Yes, it is very important sometimes for me to be able to talk something through, to be able to share with somebody who I know is trying to understand. But I have been strengthened more by seeking to understand first, or rather, by putting energy and effort into really listening and trying to help another person than I have from actually being the person who's doing the verbalizing in many cases. There's something very healing by creating a safe space for somebody to connect with you, for somebody to share what really matters, and then being able to sit there with them and help them.
Welcome to the Serve, Love, Lift podcast. I'm Tiffany Garvin. Years ago on a quiet beach in Hawaii, I felt the weight of the pain and struggles we all face in this world and how much we need each other. Soon after, this movement was born to serve, love, and lift. I believe that we are meant to serve the world with our unique gifts, love ourselves and others, and lift each other up to live with joy. This podcast is here to help you heal your heart and your life and empower you on your path to becoming the best version of yourself. I invite you to listen carefully and jot down notes that come to mind, whether they come from me or from your own heart. Then, share this episode with 3 people who you feel could use it today. I'm so glad you're here. Let's get going. We have a lot of questions when it comes to our physical, mental, and emotional health. And a lot of those questions end up on the internet. We're trying to find answers to these questions that seem to be difficult to find the answers to, whether our doctors can't help us or the latest guru can't seem to hit exactly what we're trying to resolve. So what we're going to do is I have Chris, my husband, here with us today.
Hello.
And we're going to answer some of these questions with maybe a little bit different perspective. So what's our first question?
Well, it's been interesting as we've been looking at some of the different questions that people are asking on the internet to see that there is a pattern where the most common ones have to do with physical issues that people are dealing with. So as you're working with people and having these conversations, what is your approach to addressing these kinds of questions?
Well, I try to get really clear on what exactly they're experiencing. I will ask them their specific symptoms. I'll ask them how long they've been experiencing them, what kind of circumstances are around them, what they've tried before. And a lot of the answers are the same. The main commonality is that they all end up in the same place. I don't know where to go at this point. I've tried so many different things and nothing seems to work. What am I missing? And this is where we dive in a little bit deeper, because a lot of physical issues aren't just the result of a pathogen or some kind of toxicity or some kind of wound. It actually is much deeper. And we've talked a lot about this, how our traumas are at the root of so many of our issues, even physical ones. Even if you don't think you've experienced any significant trauma, that's most often what's at the root, because we have these difficult experiences and we don't process them fully. And sometimes we don't realize we need to, because it can be just a simple thing like you're talking to somebody at the hallway at work or at church, and you walk away and you start giving yourself a new narrative. Like, did I say something stupid? Did I answer their question? Did I talk about myself too much? And then we rattle on with this concerned narrative, and that then festers, right? So that years down the road can lead to a myriad of physical illnesses. And we would never tie it back to that experience, but that's really what's going on.
I know in my own experience, it's been fascinating as I've become a little bit more aware how many times I will be assaulted by a random memory of some dumb thing that I did or said that I regret or feel ashamed about, and just recognize that I stored that away instead of actually processing through it. And I don't know how I can attribute necessarily what physical ailments I'm currently experiencing to those types of memories, but I certainly know that they're affecting me. They have to be in order for me to be feeling them that clearly this far down the road.
And I think this is what's so important, is that we start this conversation and help people recognize that there's so much more going on than you realize. And it's not that you are an unsolvable case, that doctors are stumped because you are just that 1 in a million anomaly that nothing can help. It's just because you haven't found the right angle of healing yet. In a recent episode, we talked about healing languages. And this is where we each get to learn what type of treatment, what type of approach can nurture and help recover that wound inside of us. If you go back and look at the episode with Shane Thompson, he has some beautiful insights and ways to look at this. Often when we go to a doctor, however, there's one approach. What kind of medication do you need? What kind of surgery do you need? I don't necessarily fault them. That's just how they were trained. But it would be lovely if we could get back into a more holistic conversation. If medicine and the health world as a whole would recognize that we're not just these physical, tangible beings. Descartes, hundreds of years ago, made a deal with the big epic church at the time and said, okay, if I can have these bodies to experiment on and understand how the body works, then you can have the soul. You can have the heart and the mind and all of these intangible things. I will let you have all that, and I'll just take the physical body. Well, come on. It's been hundreds of years, and we know way too much to live in that paradigm anymore. This Newtonian side of things, this physical, tangible, I have to see it and be able to test it and be able to do x-rays on it and blood tests. And, well, you know that this does not find everything. If you're listening to this podcast, you're one of those people who have been through this, and the doctors can't always find everything that's going on. And even if they do, they don't know what to do about it because it doesn't have a clear step-by-step prescription that they can give you. And the enlightened doctors, yes, will help you recognize, okay, where's your diet? Where's your sleep? Where's your exercise? Where's your stress? I mean, really, the stress is one of the biggest culprits.
You know, it's interesting. As you're talking about this, I'm remembering an experience that I had last night that I haven't even told you about. So I went to the store, and over the past few days, I've been having some discomfort in my right knee. My right knee, I know, because of an x-ray, has a little bit of a calcium deposit of sorts. So you can see it on either side of the kneecap. I have some on the inside and on the outside of my right knee. And the one on the inside is a little bit bigger, and I've felt it every now and then. But I don't feel it all the time. You would think that if I have an actual bump there that's actually rubbing up against the other side of my knee, that I would feel it all the time.
Right.
But I don't. But the last few days I have. And what was interesting is last night, I'm at Walmart, I'm getting stuff for Thanksgiving, right? And I'm walking around, and my knee is acting up again. It's bugging me. Well, as I walked past the golf section, I went in there and took a look at things, which I always do just because I love golf and I don't get out that much. And I like to be around even just a little part of it every now and then. And I've been wanting to get out lately. But again, my knee's been hurting this whole time. So you got to remember this. Well, as I was there in that aisle, and I was thinking about wanting to go out golfing again, it's been a few months and different things, I actually had kind of a realization that, you know what, right now at this moment, I don't really want to golf. And it was just this moment of clarity. I felt some tension inside of me release. And what's crazy is that as I pulled out of that aisle and started taking the long walk to the other side of the store, my knee kind of stopped hurting. It wasn't bothering me anymore. And I walked around the store for the rest of however long I was there, and it didn't bother me. So I don't know exactly what it was that got addressed right there, but there was a tension that was going on. There was a battle happening inside of me, and I think it's been going on for a few days, where I was feeling stress regarding my favorite hobby, something that in the past I've done a ton, but I haven't been able to do lately, but I've been feeling this internal battle about that. And it's manifesting as a physical symptom through something that does exist in my knee. So that thing does exist. I know it does. I've seen it on x-ray.
Yeah.
That's where the locus of it is. Well, if I'm not addressing the emotional side of it, then I'm going to go straight to the physical side. I've got to go get that thing shaved off. I've got to go get it healed. I've got to go get it cleaned up. I need arthroscopic surgery or whatever it is that they do to take care of those little bumps to the side of the kneecap. So I have found multiple times where, and it seems to happen a lot when I'm walking through a store, right, where my knee hurts and I just have to think about something, and I recognize there's a tension going on inside of me, and I work on it, or my ankle sometimes, my Achilles every now and then. I've noticed it just in these certain specific areas of my body where I tend to have greater manifestations of physical pain. And in pretty much every single case, I've been able to lessen that physical pain by addressing my thoughts and my feelings and internal tension and battling that's going on inside of me in one way or another.
I think this is an example of a really common issue where people just automatically assume, because they have no reason otherwise, to assume that's anything other than a physical issue, something that needs to be addressed physically. And that is a significant piece, because even if it is a physical issue, it doesn't necessarily mean that the answer is a physical solution. Like you said, with just having that awareness and that realization of the tension inside, that internal battle, that resolved the pain. And we don't talk enough about how our bodies are actually designed to heal themselves. And everything that persists, it's something that the body has short-circuited and can't remember how to heal, or it's off track with its natural healing processes. So instead of going and grabbing some medication or a surgery or something, take a minute, take a little bit of exploration to start understanding, well, why isn't my body healing itself? Right? This is a different kind of question. What would it take for my body to just heal itself? There are so many times when doctors will work with a patient and the issue is gone without them having the solution. And they'll write it up as a physical anomaly, a medical anomaly, instead of trying to understand, wait, what just happened? Your body healed, and I didn't provide the solution. What happened here? Because that's real. Instead, they just move on and they ignore it like it's not important, which blows my mind, because we have so many people in the world who are struggling with issues, illnesses, cancers, all kinds of diseases, and persistent pain, chronic pain issues, right? We have all of these persistent problems that doctors are not sufficiently asking questions about how somebody else healed from these things when somebody else can't. So this is what I'm passionate about, if you can't, if you're not gathering that yet, because there are answers.
It's interesting how when you look at what are people Googling? What are people asking questions about on the internet? Again, the first few are physical. That's how we are trained to look at things, right? Before I go on to the next question, I was thinking of, I don't know if you remember quite a while ago, our rain gutter next to our room, our bedroom, how the downspout, there was, somehow it got knocked off, knocked off track a little bit to where it was a little bit askew. Up towards the top, there was a joint that came apart somehow. So when it would rain, it was really, really loud going down the downspout because it was going partially through the downspout and partially outside of it. And it was hitting in all kinds of funny ways, and it would just make a lot of noise. Well, that was a very easily diagnosable problem, right? We're able to look at it and say, okay, there's a joint that's messed up there. Now all we need is a ladder that's tall enough to get up there, and we can fix that. Well, we ended up getting access to one after a while. We fixed it, and it's been a lot better since then. Right. Noticed when I got up in there that there was also something of a bird's nest that was built into it that had gotten stuck in there as well. So it's amazing what you can find once you do dig in there and see what all the issues are. What's interesting is how often there appear to be downspouts inside of us that we can't see. Yeah. Right? How there are normal, divinely created pathways, I'm going to put it that way, of healing, of the flow of healing and of energy and of wellness that are just built inside of us, and that's how we function. But how sometimes there's some kind of disruption, a joint that gets slightly off. So it's still functioning. I mean, it's still going down the downspout. It's still going through that pathway, but it's just a little bit off. Since it's kind of at an emotional level of our body, a physical remedy isn't necessarily going to fix it. Right. A physical remedy is going to address that symptom, but it's not going to actually fix the problem. So maybe it'll quiet it. Maybe it'll figure out a way to guide the water that's missing the downspout or coming out the wrong way and guide it towards not as noisy. Right. But it's not fixing the actual cause of the problem. And in order to fix those kinds of problems, you have to go about it from a different angle, a different standpoint. And so that kind of leads on to the next level of questions that people start asking, which has to do with what are actually kind of physical symptoms still, but it has to do with mental and emotional health. So they start asking things like, how do I manage stress? Or how do I manage anxiety? Or how do I manage feelings of depression? So there's a recognition that something emotional is happening. Maybe they're having a physical issue such as headaches or different physical symptoms that come because of stress, tension, and having a hard time sleeping, or different kinds of experiences that they're recognizing my emotions are causing this. How do you talk with people when they are recognizing, okay, it's not so much physical, I think there is something emotional going on here?
We start talking about what is the underlying feeling, what is the underlying experience, what old wounds haven't been resolved that are raising their hand to be answered. Because each of these things are just messages from our body, from our soul, to ask for help, to get attention. It really comes down to what programming you have in those lower levels. We're talking about the subconscious. We're talking about the pathways of energy that feed the rest of the body, the stores and the processing of the old wounds, those traumas that will surface if you don't work through them when they show up as these emotional experiences. They will continue to build until they do show up as a physical issue.
So I know this season is largely about trauma and our experience with trauma and how to recognize it as well as address it at more holistic levels, perhaps. I've really been fascinated as you've been talking over the past few years about this concept of everyday trauma and how it disrupts the normal flow of how things go on the internal workings of our bodies, those unseen but felt processes that help us go through experiences or have those experiences go through us in a way that change us and improve us and refine us as opposed to cause chaos inside of us. Right. Have you found that people are open to the idea that an accumulation of their past experiences, particularly those little traumatic ones, have a real impact in their lives?
That's interesting. It's a mixed bag. There are some that have a light go on and relief immediately because they realize, I'm not crazy. Oh my gosh, there's a reason for all of this. There is a reason why I feel so awful, either physically, mentally, emotionally, whatever it is. a lot of people are relieved when they realize that that's what's at the root. And then we're able to resolve those things and they feel so much better. And on the other side, some of my clients will resist that. They don't want to feel like they've been traumatized. They don't want to feel like they have those deep, dark wounds that are affecting them. I think it's scary. I think they might feel powerless. But as I talk with them and I show them how to resolve them, then they do slowly come around. And then once we work through them and they feel the relief, they're grateful. It's still uncomfortable though, because I think there's, a stigma around those darker wounds. It's okay if you break your arm when you fall and you've got a cast and you go to the doctor, you get it fixed that way. It's visible, it's understandable, it's finite, it's measurable. Those kinds of wounds are easy to handle mentally, emotionally, physically even. It's these wounds that we can't see that can really weigh us down, that can feel like they're impossible to heal. Because how can you resolve something that you can't see? And I get it. This was my experience early on, 9.5, 10 years ago, when I finally realized that this is where I needed to go to heal my 3 chronic illnesses. It wasn't to a doctor. It wasn't to some kind of therapist. It was acknowledging the deep, heavy, old wounds inside of me that just needed healing. They just needed to be seen and heard and answered. So I have found incredible comfort in this healing work that I teach because it answers the scary problems. It answers the scary questions and the scary health issues. This work can heal those deep, dark, scary wounds in such a profound and beautiful and simple way. You don't even have to dredge up the pain again. You don't have to live through the awful experience again for those who know the trauma, who live with that trauma every day. There is this spectrum of so many people in the world who have been traumatized deeply from trafficking and abuse and combat and natural disasters and medical malpractice, for lack of a better term. There's so many, millions, who are struggling under this and struggling to heal. And this work helps them. And on the other side, as you mentioned, everyday trauma, this affects everybody else. And it's not whether we've been traumatized or not traumatized. It's how deeply have you been traumatized? What happened to wound you? And how deeply did it wound you? Millions of us have walked past difficulties and not looked back, but then faced the effects of that difficult experience that they didn't think would leave a mark, and it did. This is why this conversation is so important, because those things will show up somehow in anxiety, in depression, in a physical illness, in cancer. Paul Whitmer in our earlier episode talked about this allostatic loading. That, I guess, is the technical term for what I see as an accumulation of everyday traumas. It affects people, everyone. And instead of thinking you're crazy or that you're a lost cause or that you shouldn't be feeling this because you didn't have any big difficult experience or you weren't injured or, there isn't an easy moment to pinpoint. You're wounded and it's okay. And there are answers.
It's interesting as you're talking, my mind is going back to some things that I've been studying recently at work. One of the things I do is teach the upcoming leaders in our organization principles related to the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen R. Covey.
Yeah.
It's a phenomenal book that addresses a lot of different things. It's amazing how many times I go through that book feeling that I'm just a terrible person because there are so many principles that are just self-evident, that are absolutely true and that we should be following and such that I recognize I violate on a regular basis. One of the things that are at the root of that, though, are the concepts of what he calls the personality ethic versus the character ethic. And the personality ethic is essentially the quick fix type of mentality. It's that there's a technique or a strategy to overcome things. The character ethic focuses on fundamental change. It focuses on becoming. And as I've been a bit introspective in recent months, studying this book more deeply and considering different things, I've recognized that a number of the ways that I think by default have been trained under the personality ethic, looking for quick fix solutions, looking for techniques or skill sets that will help overcome this deficiency in one way or another. What most of those lack, however, is the commitment to fundamental change, is that character ethic that is a very old world way of thinking about things. Over the past 120 years or so, there have been quite a few books that have come out that are leaning more and more and more towards this personality ethic, or just this idea that there are ways to tinker with how we do things that somehow create new results. What you find, though, is that when you rely on just those tips, tricks, and tinkering methodologies, that those results are not sustainable, and it creates an imbalance inside of us. And so I go along this track just to illustrate that there really are different ways to think about it. I believe that the way you teach people to think has its leanings more towards the character ethic, right, where you are teaching fundamental change. You're teaching going to the root of things. You're teaching going back to the beginning of the track and making any adjustments that need to be made at the beginning of the track so that everything that comes after it goes better.
Yeah, absolutely. There is no lasting change without internal change. I like the difference there, the personality versus the character, because I talk a lot about becoming, and you can't become something new and reach your full potential if you're just doing these peripheral changes like personality. It really does take a look at the inner character, who you really want to become, the kind of person you want to be, not how you want to show up necessarily in the world, which can be both, just the tips and tricks or the truly changing. You want to show up in the world as your authentic self, as the beauty and the strength that's truly you.
It seems to me that this last segment of the conversation is highlighting something that we've danced around in relation to the physical issues that people are asking questions about, as well as the mental, emotional, and even spiritual questions people ask about. That there seems to be a lack of understanding about who we really are and being comfortable with that. There seems to be a general need to create an image, to project something that looks different than how we feel because we don't feel good. What can we do to feel better about ourselves so that we can be more comfortable with who we are, so we don't have to feel like there's a disconnect between who we need to present ourselves as and who we are on the inside?
I think a lot of it comes down to how safe we feel to be that vulnerable. I think Brené Brown is all about vulnerability, but that takes a certain level of strength to be vulnerable. That takes a level of resilience to be vulnerable. And a lot of people are not there. I know that I struggle to be there consistently. So a lot of what I do personally to be comfortable with who I am is remind myself of the things that I know are true. I know that I am a divine being. I know that I am a valuable and powerful and resilient and purpose-filled human being. And I believe we all are. And I try to hold that space for everybody I talk to so that they feel safe around me. Because I can't help people unless they are willing to open up. If they don't feel safe to address their wounds, then my ability to help them is very limited. So it is a very intentional goal of mine to help people feel safe around me, to help them recognize that I value them and will not judge them. And in my intention to do this and to be like this, that actually creates a level of resilience and safety in me. Because one of the things that I've found is people who judge other people, who find fault in others, who are constantly irritated at others, feel unsafe because their own narrative, their own dialogue, internally and externally, creates a very unsafe space for others as well as themselves. When they focus on all the faults and all the weaknesses and all the lack, then this world that they've created where that is a necessity to judge and to see the negative creates a reality that they spin around in. And that reality makes it unsafe for themselves. So as we shift our thinking, as we shift our conversations, as we shift our narrative to one that creates a safe space for vulnerability, for mistakes, for weakness, for wounds, that's when we'll feel safe. That's when we'll feel like we can show up as ourselves, where we can not only feel safe to share our wounds and our struggles with others and get the support and the healing that we need, but to also show up as our goodness, to show up as the beauty that we are, the gifts and talents and wonderful things that we have to offer the world. That will be safe too. Because right now, I don't think it's safe for either one. And so, yes, my healing work can help us heal the wounds that cause us to feel insecure, that amplify our weaknesses and cause us to feel unsafe. This work is beautiful and powerful, and it can heal so many things. In that space, we can move forward. In that space, we can start to believe in ourselves. We can feel more internally resilient and show up more confident and not walk away from a conversation and worry that we said something dumb. We'll just go, oh well, if I did, it's all right. I'll recover.
So what it sounds like is what Master Oogway was trying to teach Master Shifu on Kung Fu Panda about being reactive to things. Because Shifu was pretty reactive there for a good while. Constantly tense, constantly feeling pressure, constantly agitated. And Master Oogway was very much at peace. You could see it in his expressions, you could hear it in his voice, and in the words that he said. He's trying to teach us to become responsive, but not reactive.
Definitely. And what helps us be more responsive versus reactive is those programs inside of us that trigger those. How are we programmed to respond to a situation? I've used this example before of how do you respond to a child who just poured grape juice on the carpet? Well, our inner panic, those programs that we have around, oh my goodness, is that going to come out? If it doesn't, how much is that going to cost? What effort is it going to take to get it cleaned? Right. That's the reactive side of things versus responding to the situation, which is coming from our wisdom, not our wounds. It's coming from, let's preserve the relationship in this situation over whether the rug survives or not. This child is already feeling worried and afraid, and how we respond to the situation can determine a million different shock waves and this domino effect in that little life. So as we focus on responding to the child, making sure that the child knows, I love you, I'm okay with you, I understand that you made a mistake, and it's okay. You're more important to me than the mess that was made. This is one of the examples of reacting versus responding, but it shows up in a lot of ways every day. When we get cut off on the road, do we react or respond? If somebody's turning their blinker on to try to get in front of us, do we react by speeding up so that we're in front of that car and we don't let them in? Or do we respond by slowing down and being kind and letting them in? Right? Like I heard somebody talk about the other day. Yeah, I've decided to just let that person in and be one car length late to work. What a great perspective. Really, what does it matter in the whole scheme of things? Because what it does to us internally, how we respond to those experiences, makes a bigger difference. If we react to that tension inside of us that says, I can't let that person in front of me, then that carries with us. Our subconscious remembers that choice for a while and can lead to how we respond to people at work, how we respond to people in the grocery store, right? It creates a tension inside of us because it's out of alignment with who we really are. That choice is responding to our wound instead of our wisdom. And the opposite is true. If we choose in our wisdom to calm the tension and slow down and allow for grace, allow that person to merge into our lane, not only is that giving that person a gift to where they feel seen and valued as a human being, and maybe they can finish going to work with a little bit more peace in their heart and maybe respond in this positive shock wave as it filters through people, that they brought a good energy in, they brought peace in, and maybe even gratitude. Maybe that really shifted their day. And in us, that choice of being generous and kind shifts us too. It puts us into a higher vibration, into a more peaceful and, a fun word, magnanimous space, right? You don't have to be a king to be magnanimous. You can be just a kind driver. And then as you are continuing to drive and you get wherever you're going, you actually feel good about yourself. You feel that grace because it comes back to you. And so I love this divergent opportunity to choose one way or another, to react or respond. And I imagine you can see in your mind's eye and even think of experiences you've had recently where you chose one or the other and how you felt afterwards. So there's an invitation for you to, each time you have that kind of choice in front of you, choose to be kind. Choose to give yourself that gift for how it'll make you feel moving forward, and the person involved, the other person who may be having a hard day, may be really late for something important, may be worried, may be agitated and had a bad experience and are not dealing with it well. What if you added that little bit of cushion, that little bit of safe space for them? That's in alignment with your highest self. That's in alignment with who you really are and can become. That goodness, that's who you really are.
I remember when I was learning how to drive, somebody said that a courteous driver is someone who is concerned about the driver behind them. Mm. And so I've always thought about that, trying to be courteous to the people behind me. And so I'm always looking and trying to make sure that, I'm not
cutting somebody off on accident.
Yeah, or doing something else that could be showing discourtesy to somebody behind me. But you're introducing another element to that, where it's a courteous driver is also someone who is kind and thoughtful towards the person who's cutting them off. Yeah. Or the person who in front of them is doing something weird, right. which happens quite a bit. And as we have more and more drivers here on the roads in Dallas, there are plenty of opportunities to exercise courtesy. Let's put it that way.
For sure.
I have noticed those two diverging paths that you just mentioned, how one agitated reaction can lead to another, and conversely, how one thoughtful response can lead to another. And the difference inside of me with those compounding choices.
I think it goes to deciding who we want to be, deciding the kind of person that we want to be. I imagine you who are listening in today are really good people. You want to be good. You want to be kind. You want to be happy. And you want to spread that and share that with those around you, right? This is the Serve, Love, Lift podcast. And so you have a good heart. If you're listening to this, you have a beautiful heart already. And I think the only thing that gets in the way of you being able to freely express that is these old wounds, is the old trauma that is lodged inside of you that causes the physical illness, that causes the mental strain, that causes the emotional difficulties and burdens that we feel, from anxiety to depression to illnesses to everything under the sun that causes us grief, really. When our bodies can't function properly, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, then there is a dissonance. And trauma causes dissonance. Trauma causes a short circuit inside of us that prevents our bodies and our spirits from functioning properly. That's how we can shift. That's how we can spread kindness, spread hope, spread this safe space for people to struggle and heal, right? Because it's both. We don't want to stay in the struggle. We want to honor the struggle, but then we want to move forward. We want to heal. We want to progress. Somebody asked me the other day, how do I be happy? I said, well, how well do you feel you're progressing in life? It's not about always achieving, about reaching the destination. It's more about how are you progressing toward that goal? How are you progressing in your health? Even if it's just that 1% principle, just that little bit each day. Are you a little bit more clear today than yesterday? Are you a little bit more hopeful today than yesterday? Do you have a little bit more energy? Do you have a little bit more peace? Right? It's the incremental progress that actually creates joy and hope. It's not just achieving and feeling relief from our wound or relief from the pain that we're experiencing. It's so much more about the progress. That's why we can have joy today despite our wounds, despite our challenges. Because if we're progressing toward the solution, if we are slowly discovering answers, that can bring us joy. We can ground our focus in that. Because who knows, you may be healed tomorrow, you may feel relief tomorrow, but if not, stay on the path. Find joy and hope in the path of progress, of moving toward that goal, of feeling more empowered to do something important in your life. Stay on that trajectory and you will reach your goal, even if it's a little ways away.
I think it's so easy for us to get the mind trap of thinking that I'll start living when, right?
Yes.
Waiting until something is different or better before we really engage in life.
Yeah.
Thinking that these things are real obstacles to really being able to live. I know I've gotten stuck there before. And what I forget in those moments is that this is life. Life is the difficulties.
Right.
Life is the trials and the struggles and the setbacks and the disappointments. But it's also my learning to bring my own weather with me.
Yeah.
Whatever the circumstance, whatever the situation, having the ability to take what is given and make the most of it. It's being able to choose light and goodness and harmony with others. It's choosing connection, choosing service, choosing to be useful and to do what I can where I can. Sometimes there really are limitations. especially compared to our expectation, right?
Yeah.
Our hope and our dream of what we might be able to do, of what we might be able to accomplish under the best circumstances, the most ideal circumstances. But when circumstance is less than ideal, and when conditions are less than favorable from a certain perspective, there's still so much living we can do. Now, we kind of strayed a long way from answering questions that are being asked online.
Right.
But it goes to show that everything is related, right?
It is, yeah.
People are asking questions about things that they're experiencing that are difficult, that are hard, that are perplexing, that they want to talk to somebody about, but they don't want to talk to somebody about.
Yeah.
There's a sense of isolation, I think, that comes from the fact that there are millions and millions of questions that are being asked on the internet in relation to physical, mental, emotional, and even spiritual health.
Yeah.
We had the opportunity at my work recently to listen to a keynote by Stephen M.R. Covey, the son of Stephen R. Covey, who wrote a couple of books about trust. One's called The Speed of Trust. The other one is called Trust and Inspire. And something he said in there really, really stuck out to me, or rather in his keynote. He said that trust is a two-way street. That yes, trust has to be earned. That's what we think about. You have to earn trust. But you also have to give it. And somebody has to give first. And so when it comes to connecting with others, we all want somebody to connect with us. But sometimes we have to give that connection first. And so here's another invitation. When you're struggling with something, or there's something that you want to learn more about, or whether it's about weight loss, that's a big one that shows up on these questions, or about healthy diets, or about all kinds of other things. Yes, do your research. Sure, absolutely. Do your research. There's no harm in that whatsoever. But also, call someone. Make a connection with somebody. And just see how they're doing. And say, hey, this is something I've been thinking about, something I want to get better at. I've been researching it. This is something I want to improve in my life. What have you learned? Or would you be my cheerleader? Right? Let's create those human connections. I think our ability to connect as humans took a bit of a hit during COVID.
For sure.
There were definitely problems with people feeling so many symptoms related to or that stem from, the everyday traumas and just life in general. That whole mixture related to stress or anxiety or depression or struggling with weight or struggling with eating habits or sleeping or all of these different things. There's so many things that we've struggled with as a human population for so long. We definitely need more connection. We definitely need more connection with each other and having that human experience, the human connectivity.
I love that. Bringing others in around us, because that's really what brings some of the greatest joy is those connections. I think if we really analyzed each of these questions that you found, there is something in there that would be benefited by having somebody else, having a support or a listening ear or somebody to root you on. Just that connection would improve each one of these.
What's amazing is that there have been many times where I have found more healing by being or giving a listening ear than by receiving a listening ear. Yes, it is very important sometimes for me to be able to talk something through, to be able to share with somebody who I know is trying to understand. But I have been strengthened more by seeking to understand first, or rather, by putting energy and effort into really listening and trying to help another person than I have from actually being the person who's doing the verbalizing in many cases. There's something very healing by creating a safe space for somebody to connect with you, for somebody to share what really matters, and then being able to sit there with them and help them. So yeah, connecting.
I love that. Well, this has been really good. And maybe we'll do a part 2 where we actually get to more of the questions and dive in deeper to more specific solutions and ideas and understanding with some of these questions. But you talk about trust. I think we trusted where this went and that it was perfect and that there will be a lot of good coming from this conversation that we had today, even if we only got through like 2 questions.
Oh, come now. We got through more like 4 of the like 50 that I looked up, but that's okay. This has been really, really good. I've really enjoyed having this conversation and stirring up the ideas and stirring up the thoughts that we've talked about off and on over the course of the last decade plus, but that are becoming more crystallized, and we're finding greater application for them. And we're constantly learning, and it's fun to just sit and discuss some of these really important topics. Maybe a little scattered, but isn't life?
Absolutely. And I love what you have contributed. I love the different insights and meaning that you have brought to this. It's been really nice to do this with you. Thank you.
Thanks for letting me come.
Thank you for being with me. Remember to share this episode with 3 people who you feel could use it today. Don't want to wait for next week for new insights and wisdom? Go to www.tiffanygarvin.com/emotional healing for a free guide to help you begin healing the emotional wounds that are holding you back. Again, the link is tiffanygarvin.com/emotional healing. It will be in the show notes as well. I believe in you. See you next week.